Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at ASUS's pretty cool Z690-P Wi-Fi D4. Is it worth it? Keep watching to find out. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at ASUS's Z690-P Prime Wi-Fi D4. These motherboard names are getting longer and longer, I swear. Now this is what I would consider to be in the kind of mid to high tier motherboards in terms of what is available for Intel's 12th and 13th gen. Currently this is now the beginning of June 2022, so obviously depending when you're watching this, your processor support may be slightly different and yeah, things may have switched up a few gears. But anyway, let's get on with it. So we're going to do a quick unboxing, go through, show you what you get. Now to be fair, I won't be showing you all the components you get when you actually buy one of these because I've actually picked this up on eBay as a used deal and it was a fantastic deal. It was originally £80 used and I managed to get it a little bit reduced because there were a few bits and pieces missing in there. So I feel that I personally got a spectacular bargain for this. At the moment, if you were to buy one of these as a retail purchase on the open market here in the UK, you can be looking at spending anywhere between £160 and £200. So we had a pretty significant saving on this one. Now, cost effectiveness is something which has always been one of those things with ASUS's Prime range. Essentially what you get is pretty much most of the features that you need, although they do take out some of the other things such as additional RGB lighting and loads of extra ports, all those kinds of things. So this is somewhat of a workhorse motherboard, but also as well, if you're an enthusiast and you want to add a ton of fans and RGB lighting and all that kind of stuff, you certainly can do. In terms of expandability, we've got an absolute ton of PCI Express ports, slots, and all that kind of good stuff, which we'll go through in the video. So let's start off with the unboxing and going through the packaging. So as you can see on the front here, so this is ASUS Prime Z690-P Wi-Fi D4. Now for those of you who are not sure, the D4 signifies that this is for DDR4 RAM sticks. If you want to use it with DDR5, you would need to choose a different version, of which there are lots of different versions of this particular board. In the Prime range, there is a Z690-A, I believe, a -P. There's the Wi-Fi versions, etc. So obviously, there's pretty much something to suit every kind of budget and price and also specifications. So do look out for that. Make sure that if you do want this specific board, that you do type in that exact part number. Obviously, if you're not too sure, there will be links in the video description which you can check out and also take a look at pricing in your regions. On the bottom of the box, it goes through some of the key specifications, so what processors it's for, so it's LGA 1700, supports PCI Express Generation 5, which is quite a cool thing to see, even though at the moment, as far as I'm aware, at this time of filming, there isn't actually any PCI Express ×5 devices actually available on the market, but I guess it's ready and waiting for them when they are released. Also supports HDMI outputs and also DisplayPort, so if you're planning to use this with a processor with integrated graphics, then you can use either DisplayPort or HDMI. Also, it supports Wi-Fi 6 out of the box, which is a really nice thing to see. Not Wi-Fi 6E, sadly, but Wi-Fi 6, I think for most people, is pretty much enough unless you've got a specific reason to upgrade. Being that this is a M.2 Wi-Fi card, should you wish to upgrade it at some point, then it's relatively straightforward to do, just a couple of screws and you can remove the actual slot from the motherboard and upgrade it later on down the line if you wish to, or obviously things like PCI Express cards or USB cards will be available. Comes out of the box ready for Windows 11, so supports all those things like TPM and Secure Boot and all that kind of stuff. ASUS Aurora supports Aurora Sync in both addressable RGB and RGB modes. There's plenty of ports on there for connecting up lots of peripherals with addressable RGB. And also it supports the second generation of addressable RGB headers, which basically means you can address more LEDs individually. I think it's up to somewhere crazy like 240 or something like that. There's more information about that in the manual. On the back of the box, it goes into some more of the features and a little bit more detail. So you've got the backplate and I/O, USB ports, basically goes through the whole lot, which we'll run through as we go through. Also, some of the key things, so you've got the 5X protection, which is yeah, debatable at best. They list the I/O shield as being one of the protection points, which is kind of a little bit of a stretch, but anyway, there it is. Also, it supports ASUS's OptiMem 2, so this is going to support up to DDR5 333 MHz RAM sticks out of the box. Should you want to spend that sort of money, realistically, I think most people will probably stick with DDR4 3600 or 3200. Depending on what processor you use, obviously, you may or may not get the benefits of that, although because this is a Z690, overclocking is unlocked, so XMP profiles and overclocking for the processor in both terms of B clock and also frequency multipliers is available should you select the right processor. So we've also got PCI Express Gen 5 connectivity for graphics cards, as we mentioned earlier, and also flexible M.2 heatsink. So they've done a really clever thing with this actually. The heatsink, which is actually on the M.2, which is just up here, is actually reversible. So if you want to use the slot at the very bottom, you can just unscrew that and put it on the bottom. Now you're probably wondering why they've just not included two of them, which I actually think is a pretty decent question, but it's easily answered. A lot of high performance drives these days, especially PCI Express Gen 4x4 drives, quite often come with their own integrated coolers. So it's often a little bit kind of scary removing those coolers if they're stuck on really well. You don't want to rip the RAM chips off the actual M.2 stick. So having the ability to just move that down to the bottom and use it on a different drive if you want to, and use the stock integrated ones on M.2 drives, I think it's a pretty good balance between actually paying for what you get and also the flexibility of using M.2s in their native configuration. So with that out of the way, let's take a look and see what we get inside the box. Now, like I said, I did pick this up as a used bargain, so there's a ton of stuff missing from here. So we will touch on those things, but obviously I can't show you them because, well, I don't got them. So the parts that I've actually have received is we do have two SATA cables. You also get a I/O shield, which as you can see is just your kind of generic vanilla plain stainless steel one. Does the job, does exactly what it's meant to do, and stops things getting shoved in where they shouldn't do. Tells you what ports are what, etc. Absolutely fine in my opinion. It would have been really nice to have a integrated I/O shield on the board, but does it make much difference? I personally don't think it does. Now at this point, normally I would be showing you the ASUS owner's manual, which I don't have, and also things like your regulatory information, and also things like M.2 screws, and most importantly, the Wi-Fi antenna. Now sadly on this, because again it was a used version, it didn't come with M.2 screws, although I did manage to pick up some from Amazon, and the seller actually reimbursed me for that kind of stuff. So again, I did get an amazing bargain on this, so I'm not displeased in any way, shape or form. I'll put some links in the video description for M.2 mounting pillars for ASUS boards, and also for Wi-Fi antennas should you need them, should you be in a similar predicament. But essentially that is going to be it. The only other thing really which is missing is the installation DVD, which contained the drivers and the obligatory Norton 360 installation. So let's go ahead and take a look at the motherboard itself. And actually this is a pretty heavy board, of which the majority of the weight, in fact around about 320 grams worth, comes from just heat sinks. So we've got a huge heat sink here over the VRMs and a slightly smaller one over the top section. You've also got obviously the M.2 cooler as well, and there is quite a big cooler over the Z690 chipset there. Again, all of that together weighs 320 grams. I'll put the individual measurements on the screen should you be interested. I'm pretty sure the top one was about 100 grams, that one's about 190-ish, that one's about 30 something, so yeah, you get the general idea. There's a decent amount of weight there, to be honest with you, and also you're probably going to need some of that because you do have a pretty decent VRM on here. It's not the best VRM in the Z690 range, which you probably would expect because you're buying a Prime board, you're not buying a TUF or a ROG or things like that. So there are some sort of slight compromises to be made. But this is using a 14+1 VRM setup using Dr. Moss MOSFETs, and also it's using the SIC 654 50 amp units from Vichet. So yeah, they're relatively good. Again, 14+1's pretty much decent. Processor wise on this, you can pretty much put anything you want on here without any real problems. There have been tests done, I haven't personally, but I have seen tests done by Hardware Unboxed, etc. with a 12900K on here, and yeah, no problems at all, and certainly well within tolerance levels for VRM temperatures, etc. If you're overclocking as well, then yeah, it's going to be absolutely fine. Just make sure obviously you have some decent case cooling, and you should be absolutely great with that. So with all that out of the way, let's take a quick tour of the board itself. So in this top section, we've got two EPS connectors, one which is an 8-pin, one which is an extra 4-pin. So if you want to provide it a little bit more extra juice, you certainly can do. Although from a single 8-pin, you're probably going to be fine with most processors unless you're doing some extreme overclocking. Moving across, we've got two fan headers there for CPU fan headers, and also there is CPU optional, so two fan headers there. Moving across, we've got our 4 RAM slots, so these are going to take up to 32 gig DIMMs in each one, so maximum total of 128 gigabytes of RAM supported. Again, if you want to, up to 5333 megahertz RAM is supported. Probably a little bit on the expensive side still at the moment, but with DDR4 kind of being phased out and DDR5 coming into the mainstream, then maybe we might start seeing those prices tumble a little bit, in which case this board is going to be willing and able to accept it. Moving across from the RAM sticks, so we've got some RGB headers here. So we've got a 12 volt RGB at the top here. Next to that, we've got a 3-pin 5 volt addressable RGB header. So if you want to use combinations of RGB setups, you can do 12 volt and 5 volt, not a problem there. Moving down, you've got your standard 24-pin power connection in the usual place. Obviously, dead center, we've got the LGA 1700 socket, or LGA 1700/1800 socket. I guess that's kind of interchangeable, or at least it will be shortly. Moving down, we've got a USB header there for USB 3.0 ports, so that's going to be your front panel connections there. Nice to see underneath that, we've got a USB Type-C, so that's USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C. Moving across from there, so we've got our M.2 slot at the top here. So this is going to be PCI Express Gen 4 x 4, maximum speed supported. If you want to put in Gen 3 drives, you can do, not a problem at all. This is only for NVMe drives, so you can't put a SATA-based drive in this particular slot, as it is taken kind of links or lanes from the processor itself. So SATA drives are not going to be supported. Also, just tucked in there, there is a AIO pump header. So if you're planning on water cooling, there is a pump header there. The pump header itself outputs 100% output all the time. So if you're planning on putting a fan on there, you probably don't want to. Although, even though it says it supports 100% fan speed, normally I find with these, there is a little bit of adjustment actually in the BIOS. So if you want to bring it down a little bit for other devices, you certainly can do. Underneath the M.2 slot, so we've got our PCI Express Generation 5 slot. So that's a x16 size slot and fully wired for that as well. It's a little bit of an unusual setup on here, how they've got these all configured. It's quite bizarre. So let's run through those now to get that out of the way. So top one is PCI Express Gen 5, so that's x16 slot and it's fully wired. Underneath that, we've got a PCI Express Gen 3 x 4 slot, although it is a x16 sized. Underneath that one, there is a PCI Express Gen 4 x 4. So again, it's a 16x times physical size, but it's only wired for x4 throughput. Underneath that, PCI Express Gen 3 x 1, obviously x1 port, and at the bottom again you've got another PCI Express Gen 3 x 4 but 16 size slot. So to run through it again, so Gen 5, Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 3, and Gen 3 again. Hopefully that makes some sense. Whilst we're in this area, we might take a look at the M.2s as well. So again, M.2, PCI Express Gen 4, NVMe only. This next one down here as well, PCI Express Gen 4 x 4 only. And at the bottom there, we've got PCI Express Gen 4 x 4 again. But this one does actually run off the chipset, so you do have the ability to install a SATA-based drive, should you wish to, M.2 SATA. So that's B&M drives there, no problem at all. And like I said, you can transfer this heatsink from here down to the bottom, should you wish to. Going back to all the connections, so we've got a TPM header here, should you wish to use a serial TPM device. Underneath that, you have got some more addressable RGB headers. So there's 2 addressable RGB headers there, 5 volt, 3 pin, next to 4 SATA ports. Now the good thing about this, because this is the Z690 chipset, if you plug in SATA drives on here, it makes no difference to any of the M.2s, and conversely, any of the M.2s installed makes no difference there. So all of the slots and all of the ports are always going to be available. There will be, I guess, some limitations slightly for certain processors if you go down sort of the lower end, like the G series or Pentiums possibly. But for i3, i5, i7, i9, etc., then you should have ability to connect to all the lanes. So moving right to the very bottom, so we've got our front panel connections there, which is in the usual ASUS style. Speakers, front panel connectors for reset, hard drive LED, etc., etc. Also, there is an additional USB 3.0 front panel header there. So if you've got the case, which has got 4 USB 3.0 headers, then you can attach them there should you wish to. I'm not entirely sure why they put 2 there. I guess maybe for cosmetics, if you want to maybe hide the cable somewhere. I'm not entirely sure if that's even really necessary, but it is there regardless. Next to that, you've got 2 USB 2.0 headers, and next to that, you've got your CMOS reset or clear CMOS button, or pins rather. Then you've got another 2 fan headers, so 5 fan headers in total. So we've got 2 at the top here, you've got 1 there for the AIOs, and also you've got another 2 down there. Next to that, there is a COM port header, should you wish to use it. And next to that is the front panel audio connectivity. The front panel audio connectivity is kind of, it is what it is. The audio chipset on this isn't the best. So we're looking at a Realtek ALC 897, which is fine. It will provide 7.1 audio output, and also there is an optical speed if should you wish to use that. Nice thing about this is they have actually put all the connections on the back, so if you want to run 7.1 you can do via analog signal. You don't have to mess around with the front panel connections to kind of tie it all in together. So yeah, overall pretty decent setup. Personally for me, I like the fact that we've got 3 M.2 slots on here. So you've got a pretty good wide range of options there. So you can have maybe your operating system on the fastest one, your games on another, and maybe video files or longer term storage on one of the other drives, which is maybe slightly larger but of a slower version, like maybe M.2 SATA, 2 TB or something. So yeah, lots of flexibility, lots of options there. Moving around to the back, so looking at the I/O. So the I/O is a little bit on the kind of a little bit sparse in my opinion, especially on the USB. So we've got 2 USB 2.0s. You've also got a combo keyboard and mouse jack, which is, yeah, we're still seeing those even now. I'm not entirely sure why. I guess again, because this is the Prime series, it's designed at also kind of office users and kind of professional users, which maybe you have to use a PS2 keyboard and mouse possibly. I don't know, I'm not too sure. Also next to that you've got your output, so if you're using a processor with integrated graphics, then you've got DisplayPort, which supports up to 4K 60Hz, and also HDMI 2.1, which is going to be the same 4K 60Hz, obviously dependent on the processor you're going to be using. Next to that, we've got our USB Gen 3.2 Type A and Type C. Next to that, you've got another USB 3.0, that's going to be 3.2 Gen 1, Type A, 2 of those. 2.5 gigabit LAN, which is always a really nice thing to see. So that is a Realtek unit on there, so that is going to be using the RTL 8125B chipset. So if you want to use 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, then you certainly can do. Will work with gigabit as well, and even 10100 should you still be using that. So yeah, nice to see that included aboard in this kind of slightly lower end. Then you've got our audio jacks, so you've got the 5 jacks there, plus the optical speed diff should you want to use it. And then we've got our Wi-Fi 6 antenna connections here. Again, this is on an M.2 type riser, so if you want to, a couple of screws on the bottom and you can undo that, take it out and replace it, should you wish to later on, with a Wi-Fi 6E or even a Wi-Fi 7, should you wish to, if you keep hold of the board long enough. So there you go, that is the ASUS Z690-P Prime Wi-Fi D4. I'm actually really pleased I got this. I must admit I did get it at a fantastic price in the end, with my kind of partial refund and all that kind of stuff tied in. I paid somewhere in the region of about £50 for this board, which I think is absolute lunacy. Considering what it is, I just got very lucky. Obviously, if you're buying this brand new, you are going to be paying a lot more than that. And there is other competition on the market. We are seeing 12 gen boards at the moment. Their prices are basically plummeting all around. It certainly seems that way. And even some of the decent B660 boards now are becoming on the market for in the sort of £80 region, which is still a fantastic option. So it's going to come down to, do you need a Z690 chipset motherboard? Have you got a K series processor? If so, then obviously it does make sense. You do have overclocking abilities, so you might as well get a board which can take advantage of that. Although realistically, these days with the 12th gen, and also for all intents and purposes, the AMD boards, pretty much most of them overclock themselves kind of pretty well anyway. Using the latest technologies, do you really need to go in and start tweaking these things now? I don't know. I think it's getting to a point where that is becoming less and less of a kind of a want or a need. It's just one of those nice to haves, which certainly, if you're looking at getting this board, if it's at a good price, I think it is one of those things which is nice to have should you need it a little bit later on down the line. So anyway, let me know what you think about this one in the comments section below. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with it. I can't wait to do a build in it. Although I am keeping my eyes open for a decent price 12th gen processor of either the 6, 8 or higher cores, which would be really nice, although they are still quite expensive, so I might have to wait a little while. But anyway, that has been the ASUS Z690-P Prime Wi-Fi D4. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.